Hello, hello, hello. Welcome once again to the Common Discourse podcast. Boogie Bumper here with you with a very, very special edition, a very special treat. Today I welcome for a in-depth philosophical discussion and a bit of shooting the shit around the outside as well, the only libertarian that I'm aware of to be simultaneously called an anarchist and a statist by the same group of people. Jason Lyon, the bearded truth. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us. Oh, we've lost his audio. We've lost his audio straight out of the blocks. Well, this is exciting. Are you there? Can you hear me? We've lost your audio. It was working well to begin with. Has your microphone crapped out? Nope. Something has gone awry, my friend. Have you muted yourself, perhaps on Zoom? Whoop. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. There we go. Isn't that fantastic? Welcome.
Success.
Should I do the intro again? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Common Discourse for the second time today. I'm joined by the only man to be simultaneously called a statist and an anarchist by the same group of people, the one and only Jason Lyon, the bearded truth. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well and finally able to share my free voice. Finally, the man has stopped censoring me, I guess. So thank you so much for having me on. I know this has been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has. We've both been struck down recently with various ailments. You yourself, you've been, I guess, squatting from place to place in true libertarian fashion, I assume, moving from house to house, not paying rent because that would be, of course, feeding some kind of evil constructed system of the modern age.
To take it from the LibSoc caucus, rent is theft, so I stopped paying rent.
Well, we can't have you stealing rent. I myself was coughing up a pint of lung butter daily for the last month, so it's good to be back on track, and it's good to have you on finally. Let me kick it off this way, Jason. Most of our podcast audience is Australian. So I guess when we think about libertarianism, for someone like me and people that listen to this show, we just assume that there's libertarianism, there's a lot of bad education out there about what it is and what it means. And, that's not necessarily just an Australian or an American thing. I think, people get into these discussions and then kind of just fall back on tried and proven easy attack points like, oh, well, if you're a libertarian, who's going to pay for the roads? And then everything kind of disintegrates from there, right? So I guess if you could take a couple of minutes for us, describe maybe the difference between republicanism or conservatism and libertarianism and why there may be libertarians in the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is not libertarian.
So we have libertarians that are in the Republican Party. The basic premise of the Libertarian Party, which has been grossly mischaracterized by a lot of people, is that the Libertarian Party just believes that no one is better at choosing your path in life than you. You know all of the externalities of why you make the decisions that you make. As long as you're not hurting somebody else, you do the decisions that you would like. Meanwhile, conservatism or Republicans, they view the government has a specific role in controlling society or controlling the people in some aspect. It's not necessarily as large or as controlling as what the Democrats want or what the progressives or even, socialists and communists. But so the Republican Party and conservatives as a general view, they almost fall into a theocratic view in which you say, here's the Bible, here's what my religion says. And they they use the law, they use the legal system in order to kind of justify that in some ways. Now, that's not a end all be all. That's not encompassing all of their decisions, but it's a good majority of them. We can see by the way that conservatives and Republicans are in favor of going into wars for certain countries and everything else, and that's just something that's not in line with the libertarian value. I don't want to go into like a super long anti-war discussion.
That's fine. So would it be fair to say then, and correct me if I'm wrong, because as an outsider looking in, when I study things like the founding of the United States of America, the Constitution, the founding fathers, to me it's clear, and I could be wrong, I could be misinformed, but to me it's clear that this was a libertarian foundation, basically first principles movement that was started in the United States. And then over the course of, let's keep it to our time frame, because I'm sure there was issues back in the 1800s, but it's going to be a little bit difficult to keep that relevant. Just in the course of our lifetime, things like the Patriot Act, for example, federalization of various bureaucracies, removal of power from the states and pushed into Washington, removal of the rights for states to govern themselves, and by proxy of that, individuals having less freedom within that structure. We're a long way away from the founding fathers, are we not?
Oh, we are. Every year it seems like we're getting further and further away. And actually the founding, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence is where a lot of my core values come from. And we see, like what you're saying with the Patriot Act or with the National Defense Authorization Act, and with all these other actions that are being taken by DC, we're seeing where they're not only tearing away at our republic, but they're tearing away at the Constitution. They're diminishing it, they're removing it, and it's always being justified by the people. This is, which is, as you spoke, the founding fathers were libertarians. They were radicals for their era. And that's why the Libertarian Party still is viewed as the radicals, as the crazies.
Well, I was going to say, really, the radicals with that last guy, Gary Johnson. But then when you added crazies on the top, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's fine.
Everyone points at Gary Johnson. They say, "Oh, well,
it's easy.
What is Aleppo?"
It's too easy.
You have somebody that's not going to bomb Aleppo because he doesn't know where it is.
See, here I am doing the very thing that I was lambasting in the start. Like, my very next question is going to be, so who's going to pay for the roads, smart guy? No. So, in the last presidential election, I thought this is the way when I look at Western countries, the same thing's happening here in Australia. There is a general, would you say, angst against two-party politics, in so much as maybe not the two-party political system, but rather the indistinguishable nature of the two parties themselves, especially at the top. For example, here in Australia, we've seen a shift, Jason, in the last 10 years, where our third-party vote has gone from 5% to 25% in the last 10 years.
Oh, that's beautiful. I wish we would do that.
Well, then I guess my question is, and this, don't take this the wrong way, I believe you are a Libertarian Party member. Is that true? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Why hasn't the Libertarian Party been able to capitalise on the general malaise of the people and their disenchantment with the two-party system as it's been growing of late?
So it's certainly a multifaceted issue. The way that I'm not too keen on the Australian education system, but
don't worry, we're not keen on it either. Don't worry about that. We're not keen on it.
Our federal government is really entrenched in the way our education is provided. They borderline are determining which courses are allowed and which courses are not allowed when it comes to middle school, elementary school, high school. And now that they're funding in the colleges, they're also being involved with that. And so they're taking away and they're tearing away at the Constitution, where if we go back to the founding of our country, or of my country, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to conflate you with that.
Just right for me. You're going to have ICE knocking on my door if you keep that up. I didn't even know.
They'll be coming after the Russian. It's okay. It's, if we go back to the founding, what it was in the beginning, you had the two parties. We've always had two parties, and one party was larger federal government. The other party was larger state, right? And that was the divide. And now we have to where is, do we want a federal government that's more focused on entitlements, on social welfare, on the social safety net, or do we want a government that's more involved with the wars and involved with cutting corporate tax rate? And that's it, right? That's really the two big differences between those two parties. And nobody is aware of what the Constitution is, what your amendments are, what the rights are that are protected by the Constitution. And so without knowing those things, they're not willing to stand up for those things, and they're willing to fight in order to diminish them or remove them. I mean, the Second Amendment is certainly one that is consistently under attack. And even some Republicans are in favor of diminishing it.
Sure.
And so it's just those two. It's just disgusting. They've left the topic of what the scope of government is supposed to be to just determining which way the government is supposed to continue to grow.
That's interesting that you say about the federal government versus the state government, because I don't think I've ever heard it characterized like that before. That might be the first time I've actually heard that. So that's what's understood to be the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. One used to be for the states and one used to be for the federal government. Is that right?
And that was actually during the Civil War. That was one of the large topics. This has been forgotten about and ignored by a lot of people that talk about the Civil War today. But the South, the Confederates, they were actually not only were a lot of them were in favor of slavery, which is the one that gets the focus point because of postmodernism. But it's also the Southern states were saying, no, we don't want the federal government to dictate over us. We want to have our sovereignty. We are a part of the 13 states that originally signed into the compact being the Constitution, and we want to maintain the controls that we have, the powers that we did not delegate to the federal government. And so it was supposed to always be the states were equal to the federal government. It was never equal to or greater than the federal government. It was never that the federal government was to be greater than the states.
You know, I often get criticized for bringing up unfortunate, relevant points in history, Jason, but one of which was Honest Abe, for all of the plaudits that he receives, he himself did not consider Africans to be equal to the European population.
And that's certainly something that's disgusting, and rightfully so. People need to notice it, but I don't think that warrants erasing him from history, which is
no. But I mean, he also locked up a lot of journalists at the time as well. If he was viewed in modern day standards, he would be called a fascist. But I mean, it's just an unfortunate era in history, I suppose. Now, so Donald Trump, for example, I know that let's call you a Donald Trump agnostic, perhaps. You're not a MAGA. You're a MAGA guy, perhaps. You want to make America great again, but you're not a Donald Trump sycophant. Would that be a fair characterization? Well, we've lost your audio again. We've lost your audio again. Fiddle around with that. Oh.
Is that better?
We've got you now.
Okay. I might be lower quality. It's off the laptop itself, so
that's okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be an accurate way. I've got a good friend that brings me on his radio show, and the way that he describes it, I pat backs and slap wrists, just the way it goes. And Trump is not an exception to that rule.
Sure. So I was watching your Periscope earlier this morning, and I always enjoy them when I can catch them. Now, let's really bore my audience to death here and let's get into the really sexy libertarian topics like budget deficits and trade gaps and, individual liberty per se. So you were speaking about the EU and free trade. Can you just expand on what you were talking about this morning and where you see the problem?
So one thing that I've been very vocal about was this tariff war that Trump wanted to start, and because Congress gave away their authority over tariffs to the president in office, that was like from 40 years ago. he's able to do as he wants. So he started a tariff war, and during this tariff war, he started raising the tariffs against any country that had tariffs against us, and EU was one of those populaces. So he raised the tariff against the EU, and was just like, once you guys want to have fair trade being no tariffs against us, we'll have no tariffs against you, we will drop our tariffs. It escalated a couple times, and then they came back and they said, here, we have this perfect deal for you. Exactly what you wanted. If you want the fair trade, if you want the no tariffs, we'll give that to you. No questions asked. And Trump decided to renege on that deal and said, no, I was willing to come on. I was ready. I had the title put in, and I was like, I'm going to come on there and say I was wrong. Trump won on the EU. We still have a couple other countries, but he won on the EU. Fantastic time. And Trump came in, and
the humble pie was resting on the windowsill, just like a picture book. You had the whipped cream ready to go.
And Trump came back and he was like, nay, Jason, you sit back, you wait your turn.
You chill.
I've got one more wrench to throw in this. I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into this, if you will. I'm going to monkey it all up. And so he says, no, it's not a good enough deal. What I want to force a contract in which the EU, the countries within the EU, will be purchasing more vehicles from America to force that trade. And then also we will remove all tariffs on both sides. And so on that note, it's no longer about the fair trade. It's no longer about the free trade. It's about the dominance of America exuding its trade influence, its trade power over lesser countries.
Sure. Well, I guess, is this a strong arm tactic by Donald Trump? I guess the problem is, Jason, he was elected with certain expectations, and if you're a watcher of politics, like I assume you are, and a very in-depth one, which I know you are, you'll know that politics, for a large part, is a game of managing and massaging expectations. Advisors really don't like politicians to make promises. I mean, I was listening to a clip earlier this morning of the guy down in Florida being asked, will you guarantee that you won't raise taxes? And it's like, I will guarantee that I'll do whatever it takes. And it's like, no, hang on. That's not what we're being asked here. Do you guarantee that you won't raise taxes? I guarantee that I will govern to the best of my ability. No, that's not what we're saying. Because, of course,
it's when you make semantics.
Exactly. But I think that's part of the problem here. A lot of people are frustrated with that, which, again, is, as a little side note, makes me wonder why the Libertarian Party hasn't been able to capitalize as much, because if there's anything you can say about, the libertarian end of the Republican spectrum, so to speak, it's that it all starts at first principles, right? And, it's basically, I assume, if you get first principles right, then more often than not, the outcome is going to be what you want, and it's going to work out in your favor if you take the logical first principled approach. Of course, with modern politics, everything's kind of muddled, and the Republicans are acting like Democrats, the Democrats are acting like Republicans. So you have to make promises according to winning votes at the particular time. And Trump basically broke the mold by giving people expectations. He was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. This is how we're going to approach it. To a large part, that's exactly what he's done in many respects. In a lot of ways, that's what he's done. So, do you think the problem is with expectations with the people of America, or is it the way Trump is approaching, his trade talks more generally speaking? Like, are people expecting the wrong thing is what I'm saying.
So I think that if we went off of Trump's words on their own, right, when he made those promises, because he was pretty clear, and that's what his goal was. There's also the issue of tribalism that's coming along with this, right? He wants to see how far he can go. He knows that EU is a bunch of soy boys that will bend and fold however he wants. And this is, I think that he's doing this on twofold. The first fold is that he knows that his support base, which is a very large support base, we see this not necessarily in the polling numbers, because we know a lot of Republicans don't trust the polls, and so they won't even answer the polls when asked. But we know this when it comes to voting, right? Whenever, I would say 95% of the candidates that Trump endorses, they win, right? They dominate. You'll see 38-point swings in their elections. So he's doing that to add fuel to the base, to say, look, I'm still providing to you guys. I'm still giving you guys a better condition than what you guys had before. And so that's helping him there. The other part is he's trying to play the hand that the media can't find a fault for. I think the media, if they were principled in any way, they would take my stance on this. But we know, I mean, you do videos all the time on them. They have no principle about them. They're going to say, look, he's oppressing the EU. He is racist against the EU and is destroying their ways of life by forcing them into trades. Like,
he's anti-European here at the Democrat Party and the media. We love Europe.
Yes, exactly. So, he's hitting another hit on the media, and I hate the media. I absolutely abhor the media. So I cheer on that platform, right? I pat them on the back, hit the media as hard as you want, force them into portraying you in a positive way, and know that they won't, and know that just hurts their credibility in the long run. He is really setting up the Republican Party in a lot of ways to not only dominate in this midterms, but in 2020, he's guaranteeing his next position. On a principle level, I just don't agree with what he's doing and how he's obtaining it.
Okay. I've got a comment and a question from our mutual friend Tom Chatelet, Jason, who wanted me to ask you about what about the shock troops that pave the way for the bearded truth. And I'll take some liberty here, pardon the pun, seeing as we're doing a libertarian episode. I'll take some liberty in breaking that down and dissecting that in so much as perhaps the Donald Trumps of the world and the sometimes less principled approach to defeating one's enemies may indeed create more space, more breathing room for the principled folks amongst us to operate and convince the people who have not yet sold their souls to the devil. How about that?
So this becomes an issue in some ways, and I understand the logic. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's winning to it, and there's also catastrophic losses, in my opinion, which is why I'm just going to remain being the principled one. Sure. We saw this with a couple of other recent events, and the idea that you forego your principles and you do it to hit your political opposition or whatever opposition it really is. You can actually set it up to where that becomes the norm. Maybe not for you, but the norm for people on your political side. They see that as a win, and then that becomes their norm. And when it comes to a president, to bring it back to the specific idea, when it comes to a president saying, look, we're going to make a deal, and this deal is going to benefit America to the detriment of another country in the way that they want to be free or have their own liberty to decide on how they want to make their trades. When President Trump comes out of office, which is obviously a fact that he will be.
Don't be so sure. Don't be so sure.
He may live forever and always reign. He's going to remove the amendment. Yeah. He's going to remove the 22nd Amendment. He's going after it. It's going to be good. So it's you have to think about it. Yes, in the short-term wins, that you can call that a win, you can call that a loss. But in the long term, that's setting a precedent that's not something that people should be exactly cheering on for, I think.
Okay, well, take political correctness, for example. Is it political correctness? I would characterize this way, and let me know if you disagree. I would characterize it as like an artificial constraint on thought and conversation. I characterize thought and language as two ballroom dancers, and thought leads language around the room. So where thought goes, language follows. Now, if you cut off the feet of language, so language can no longer dance in her pretty pink stilettos, you make it very difficult for thought to win the dancing competition. So then thought is merely just dragging somebody else around the room against their will, because obviously why would you be dancing if your feet have just been cut off? So with political correctness, right, if we are forced to, in a large way, where the public space is, where the debates are happening, if people are forced through artificial means to be constrained in this environment, is it then not right to use those conditions against one's opponents for the object of defeating, for the object of eliminating that environmental false constraint in the first place?
Well, I think you're giving them ground if you're saying, look, you set these rules and I'm going to abide by them, right? When it comes to political correctness, it's are you going to abide by that, or are you going to be able to take that which they say you can't say? Are you going to take that and actually portray that in a way that people want to attach themselves to? Are you going to just take a severed foot in this instance, a severed foot with a stiletto?
I like that you're carrying on. I like that you're carrying on with the metaphor. It's fantastic.
Take this stiletto and run around and say, look, this is a beautiful stiletto. It shouldn't be discouraged. There's no reason to take this out from our lives, and there can be a benefit. And when it comes to that, you can show the dance moves that are capable in a stiletto that aren't capable in tap shoes, because you can be much more elegant in the way that you stride around the ballroom. And so you have to be able to fight back against the laws on which they push. Don't accept the terms and conditions of which they say you have to play the game by, but instead show why the rules that they're trying to set are to the detriment of everyone else.
Do you think we're in an age and a time, and this is a serious question, do you think we're in an age and a time where it's generally accepted that large sections of the population are open to these kinds of principled arguments, or do you think it goes over a lot of people's heads, which makes it, pretty impossible to push, the libertarian perspective out there and make it mainstream?
It is extremely difficult in our day and age, because when it comes to principles, when it comes to challenging someone's views, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, and trying to push a philosophical idea onto someone else, which is divergent from where they began, is certainly a task that not many are capable of doing, but it's not impossible. And I may sound like an egotistical ass when I say this, but there are some mouth breathers out there that just reject anything and everything that goes against them. And I think that that's a vast portion of the population. But it's just about, you have to go after the higher people. You have to go after the people that have a large following, and then you slowly convert them and they're able to take their followers. For example, I know a lot of people don't find him as an admirable person, or some people find him and adore him. Ben Shapiro. He, on a philosophical level, he is pretty concrete and he is pretty sound in some of his logic. And he has actually influenced a lot of people. This is undeniable to say that he hasn't. And so if you can take somebody like Ben Shapiro and you can shift him towards liberty, or shift him towards being a more moral person, which honestly, he's been pretty immoral in the past. But if you can shift him, he's reaching 100 million people a week. Or not 100 million. I apologize. That was a grossly overestimation. A couple million people each week. And so taking that, and you can make shifts and you can make changes, and that's what we have to do. And we have to actually reach the people that want to have honest conversations, and that's the important part.
Okay. Well, pardon me. See, I suspect that sounds great, right? But do you think society? And I'm gonna ask a couple of tough questions, put you on the spot a little bit, but you like that.
Love it.
Do you suspect society, in all honesty, is moving toward that or further away from it, from that environment?
Because of our society, because of media, because of everything is so instant gratification, it does make it difficult in order to change someone's mind on things such as raise the minimum wage. Why would we raise the minimum wage? Well, it's going to make people that are poor in a better life. Well, that sounds great, but then you look at the actual facts and statistics around it, and this is where I would say worldwide we have a lazy population now. Instead of actually looking into the theory, they would rather take those hashtags, they'd rather take those quick lines and just think that they're coherent, logical, and very resoundful. And so that is something that has to be challenged, in that having the consistency, having the principles behind it, that's where the That's where a lot of people are going to fall away from, and that's the biggest struggle. That's why the Libertarian Party is struggling. That's why even conservatism is struggling, because it's easier to be willed, or to have the wool pulled over your eyes and to follow blindly, than it is to become informed, to become a free thinker, especially in this day and age when, you have a black R&B artist, hip hop artist that says, hey, be a free thinker. And they're like, oh, look at him, he's an Uncle Tom. They associate free thinking to a disgusting thing.
It's a sin, Mike.
Yeah.
It's a sin, comrade. We must not think freely. Here at the government, we will think for you. I have a lot of sympathy with a lot of libertarian views. I know you and I butt heads on occasion, but I think that's generally stuff around the edges. I can go a long way with libertarianism. For example, the minimum wage. You wouldn't believe the amount of hate. I mean, like, you've seen it yourself probably, like visceral, dripping, distilled hate. Like, just say you're having drinks with somebody and, I'm a blue-collar guy as well. That's what doesn't make sense to a lot of people. You see, I'm supposed to be pro-union. I would be a Democrat, right? I'm supposed to be all for raising the minimum wage and all for welfare and all for free. That's the genre of human I supposedly fit into when we break it down in an identity politics schema. But unfortunately, whether it's a curse or a blessing, I was able to think for myself to some extent. So when we talk about things like the minimum wage, for example, Jason, I would say to people, well, we should abolish the minimum wage. And it's just like shock horror. They're like, that's extreme. What, do you want people to starve to death? And I'm like, well, no, you assume just because I don't want government regulation that I want nothing. But what I want is more people to be able to work. And they would say, yes, but what's the point of working for $5 an hour? And I would say, well, if you're there for 6 months, you acquire certain skills, you learn how to take orders, you learn what capitalism is all about, and you are then in a better position to, put your skills in front of the next employer who might want to pay you $10 an hour. Minimum wage isn't supposed to be a lifelong endeavor. And I would suggest if you are on minimum wage for the entirety of your working life, then that's exactly what you deserve. And you haven't done enough to upskill. You haven't done enough to retrain. You haven't done enough to make yourself more valuable to an employer than the next person. And that's really the game, right? Like that's what free market capitalism is. It's not everybody wins. It's really meritocracy. Right, and a way of allocating wealth.
Make yourself better, make yourself more valuable, and get out there and build yourself.
All right, exactly. So you're with me on that. Now here comes the problem. 100%. Now here comes the problem, the counter argument, right? Oh, what about all those people who can't? Well, what about those people? What about those people who can't? And then the cost of living goes up, and they don't have the ability. There are dumb people walking around. To see this, I suspect this is the thing. See, you're not like most libertarians, and correct me if I'm wrong. Where I separate from popular libertarian theory is, when it gets to open borders and stuff like that, and just all out extreme free trade. Because obviously, if you've got regulations and conditions that you must submit to, and your opponent in this trade, game doesn't, then you're putting yourself at a distinctly disadvantageous position, and it's very difficult to come out on top principled-wise. So how would you combat then people who say, well, there are too many dumb people out there for pure free market capitalism to take hold, and we need the government to, quote unquote, protect those people, even though I don't like using that term, protect those people from the savagery and the anachronistic capitalism that would surely lead to thousands of people starving to death in the streets?
Well, that's a huge topic. That's a huge can of worms, if you will. To begin with, the federal government has not always been involved with this, and we've had poor people. Poor people is a natural occurrence. And so what do we do with people? So for example, people that are under the IQ of 85, they're clinically proven to be mentally retarded, right? They're incapable of learning skills. You can have them do something routine and they won't pick it up for weeks or months at a time. How do we provide to them? Well, before the federal government got involved, how this was structured was you would have a reliance. You would have a hierarchy or a tier system in which you would go and seek help. The first tier would be your family, right? If you have family members, your family members would be able to help provide for you. They'd give you food, they'd give you shelter, they'd give you whatever you need. Should you exhaust that, or should that not be something capable for you, you could go to your neighbors. If you're homeless and you don't have a community in which you can belong to, you're more than free to go to a church. And so the idea is you start small. You start on the individual. If you are unable to provide for yourself, you expand out to your family, you expand out to your community, your neighborhood, your city, your churches. You go out to your state, and then you go out to your federal level. If our society was to do that, our federal entitlement system would drop drastically. Of course, that's in the ideal world. How you provide for them is if they are under the IQ of 85, or if they're somebody that's not functional for an economic basis, you can find them a skill or an attribute in which they can provide, right? You can have somebody that sweeps up the floor all day long, and you can provide them a little bit of money. You can provide them with something.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be something that's enforced and regulated by the government.
I mean, we have. Sorry to cut you off here, Jason, but we have agencies here, and I'm sure you have similar in the United States. And these people do tremendous work. These are very big-hearted, caring people, and they take people with mental and physical disabilities and actually, ingratiate them into workplaces. And, the value of life for these people that they experience goes through the roof. And, it takes a very big-hearted employer for a start, because there's certain challenges and difficulties that come along with that. But, I think, this is a free market option too. I don't think these places are charities. These places get paid to provide employment to, employers. Would something like that, even if, you don't have to be quote unquote, mentally retarded or anything like that. But could more of those programs, for example, be something that would that conform to libertarian principles or no?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The free market. Anytime the market does something, anytime a company does something, and for example, Goodwill does that for a lot of people. People with physical ailments, people with mental ailments, people who undergo gender dysphoria. I would say, like, in my normal life, not in like the nightlife or in like the sex rings or whatever. I see a lot of people with gender dysphoria that work at Goodwill, right? It's the people that are kind of ostracized from society. They can go and work at Goodwill. Is the pay great? No, but it provides them with something. It gives them a purpose, and it does reward them in some capacity. And then also we have places like Walmart. People want to criticize Walmart so much.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If we go and look at the door greeters, aren't exactly the cream of the crop, right? They're people that are kind of in need, but they don't put a lot of importance on them, and they're able to provide. And I think I've even seen I've seen where they even move them into cashiering or into the food work, in the deli and whatnot. And so there's ways that the market can help provide and still give on to them. But whenever going back to the minimum wage topic, you tell the company you have to provide them with $15 an hour. Now you're taking somebody that's not worth the $15 an hour to where they're losing money by hiring this person. The company's not going to just give away that money. They're not a charity, like you said. They're going to not give that job away to that person. They're going to give somebody that can grow. And so it's that ideology where the ends. Your goal is to help them out, and you're actually hurting them by pushing more government on that topic and that idea.
Okay,
it's disgusting.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, healthcare, for example, this is obviously a big topic in libertarian circles constantly. Like, should there be free healthcare? Of course, it's not free unless you get doctors to work for free and all the equipment is free. That's one thing that annoys me no end when people say, "Oh, we should have free education." I'm like, "Oh, okay. What are the teachers working for then?" Oh, what are they working for ICE? Are they? Or I mean, what's the story here? But putting that to one side, healthcare. Let me ask you what you think of this. I think I've heard in the past Rand Paul, someone who's got some libertarian acumen, so to speak. He's suggested in the past maybe a system of compulsory private health insurance. Now, that's as far as I'll go with Rand. But what I was thinking, expanding on that, how about this? Health insurance according to how healthy you are. So every 2 years or something, you go for a physical. And if you are in peak physical performance, then your health risk, your risk of illness is going to be lower. Therefore, it's less overhead for the insurance company to cover you, so you can get it at a reduced rate. If you go in there and you're smoking and you're obese, remember this would be compulsory, right? But that's the trick, right? So you go in there, you get your medical done. If you're smoking, you're obese, you're an alcoholic, your risk is going to be a lot higher, so you would have to pay more. For people on welfare, we could deduct a certain amount from their welfare payment, and it would just be like absolute bare minimum cover. So it's like a carrot and a stick situation. So what you want to do basically is have people live healthier lifestyles, which would reduce, the health costs, and also would reduce it in their pocket as well. You want people on welfare to get off welfare and to lead healthier lives. So that would be, an incentive then to try and find, even if it's part-time employment, because you can afford, you can pay a little bit extra for the healthcare and you can get a little bit extra service. But of course, the problem is, how do we best, I'll put my Darth Vader helmet on. How do we best inspire people, quote unquote, to take up, these obviously benefiting programs unless we give them a little kick in the ass first to lead them in the right direction?
Well, when it comes to insurance companies, there's already some government regulation that's happened in which you have to treat people. You can't go in full in depth and find out all this information about how somebody lives their lifestyle. You'll see the very generic, very simple questions such as, do you smoke? Do you drink? How often do you drink? How often do you smoke? But it doesn't ask you the more extensive things. How physically active are you? How often are you getting involved in extreme sports? Are you riding a motorcycle? When you drive, are you driving above the speed limit? Are you driving below the speed limit? Are you driving to excess? So there's many issues that get involved with that. And so the best way that the insurance companies were able to get around this was to look at your history and judge it off of your age, your history, and your weight. And of course, the questions I elaborated earlier. And so they're able to work it off of that. Now, I agree with your welfare statement on taking it out of their welfare, and if it's a reduced cost or if it's not even a reduced cost, you're on welfare, therefore you're going to pay for this. And if you want health insurance, that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to figure out how to allocate your money. And it would be highly encouraged, but we shouldn't be forcing people to do anything, even if you're living off the backs of the taxpayers, which I completely vehemently disagree with. But when it comes to the healthcare thing as a whole, we have people that believe that it's somehow right. And like you said, if it's going to be free, then what are the doctors going to be working for? And there's also the other aspect of that. If healthcare becomes a right, then you're saying that anyone providing that healthcare is now enslaved to providing that care to others. Because if no doctors existed, then who's going to provide that healthcare? Who's going to provide that service? And it gets down into this philosophical rabbit hole of, you can't make something that's a positive right a right. You just can't do it. And we can try to provide a healthcare to everyone. We can try to provide health insurance to everyone, but it's not on the backs of me and other productive members of society to provide for others. Now, I'm saying this while not having health insurance myself. My wife has health insurance because she couldn't walk down the street without stubbing her toe. But now I'm getting in trouble. But it's, I live a very careful life now because I know I don't have that protection given to me. And so when we can afford it, I will go out and get healthcare for myself. I know it's like $200 a month or $100 a month. I know what it costs. And so for the meantime, I mitigate those risks, and I do everything that I can. Sure, a freak accident could happen, and that's why I want to get catastrophic insurance. And so there's already marketed ideas out there in order to try to provide and to help people out. If you don't want to get insurance, you can go to catastrophic insurance, Aflac and things like that. Or even beyond that, there's cash hospitals. There's places that you can go in for minor bump scrapes, sicknesses, illnesses, and they can provide to you for cash. And so it's at a markedly lower cost. And you can get exactly what you need at the time that you need it. It's just on you to take care of it. And there's so many different ideas out there on how to fix this problem. And I don't think that more government in any way is going to help fix it. It's just going to make the problem worse and more exacerbated.
See, while you were making out that very articulate and intelligent response, I was just cast back to the beginning of the conversation, Jason, where you said the part of the problem with getting libertarian thought out there, getting people talking about it, getting people excited about it again. I mean, I think, a lot of what rode Trump to victory, I think, was like just general excitement in people. Like, hey, this is something like this is different. We're going to tear these people apart. We're going to make big changes, right? And so how can you do that? And, the problem is you said people go for easy answers. And, I guess there's a big difference. And, just that response, just this discussion itself, just in that one area of healthcare, I guess it highlights that there's a very big glaring difference between the easy answer and the correct answer. And the correct answer isn't necessarily easy to find. So just to see us off, what's caught your eye right now? Like what is the Libertarian Party into right now? Where is your front line? Where are your guns drawn, and who is the target?
We actually right now in specifically in South Carolina, the state that I'm living in, we're having I think it's more of a national level now even. We have, throughout the couple thousands of members that we have across the country, actual card-carrying Libertarian Party members, we have a dozen, maybe 24 people that are Libertarian Socialists, and that has been the big point of contention for a lot of people.
Okay, whoa. Can you rewind? A what? A Libertarian Socialist?
Libertarian Socialist. I mean, it's almost as contradictory as what the anarcho-communists are.
Wow.
Antifa. Yes, this is an actual true-fledged group, Libertarian Socialists.
That's incredible. But you saying you're having to confront the Libertarian Socialists is like me saying I'm going to go out tomorrow and fight a war against Santa Claus. And people would look at me and go, he doesn't exist. That's not a real thing. And I'm like, no, Santa Claus is coming to get me, man. He's got a Beretta. All of the reindeer are armed to the teeth. This is serious stuff. Libertarian Socialists.
It's
wow.
amazing, isn't it? It's truly it's amazing to try to wrap your mind around the ideology that they have.
Give us a taste.
So their idea is, I'll take the biggest premise that I've been doing a lot more research on, and that is once the state is removed. So Libertarian Socialists are anarchists that are socialists. They're not minarchists that are socialists. They're anarchists that are socialists. So they want to remove the state. That is the state government, the federal government, any kind of government. And once they remove that, basically all property, because it was associated with the state, is now free game. So once the state has been disassembled, now everything is free game. So one of those ideas is, let's say Boogie finally moves over to the States, and you've got your main house, and then you've got your vacation house for the summertime, you've got your vacation house for the winter time, and then you've also got your getaway house up in Montana just to get away from everything. So they disassemble the state.
Sounds like I'm doing pretty well in the States, just quietly. Sounds like I'm doing all right.
Yeah. You'd be a celebrity, good sir. And so once they disassemble the state, you get to choose one of those properties, and that's all that you need. Therefore, that's all that you get. And so everything else becomes free game. If somebody comes and squats on that land, that is now theirs. It's a horrible, catastrophic idea in which property rights don't exist. and it's more on the backs of your needs rather than the backs of your wants. They do push for socialistic ideas such as encouraging all corporations, all companies to be horizontal in their tiering, in which, you know, regardless of how much each employee provides, they all receive the same as everyone else, despite the fact that logic and history have shown that that's not a functioning economic system in any capacity.
By encourage, I assume you mean force. Would that be fair? It's funny because you're saying once the state is removed, Jason. I once had an argument with a socialist. We were talking about Cuba. And I said, well, what about all of these, you know, Castro used to put his enemies up against the wall and shoot them all in the back of the head if you didn't believe in the socialist utopia. And he literally said to me, no, that's not when the socialism started after the war. I'm like, right. So once all the maggots were crawling out of the skulls of their enemies, then they turned to each other and said, right, socialism starts now. Right? It didn't start before. So once we eliminate the fascists,
once it comes to power, that's when it happens.
Right.
It's
so the libertarian socialists doing their best to bastardize libertarianism by the sounds of it.
Yes, and they've got plenty of tankies. Like I said, there's like 24 people, and they've got just absolute tanks, and they're just running through and just going, "Rah, you guys aren't real libertarians." You know, they're trying to conflate like libertarianism and what they're saying, and it's truly like amazing to try to understand this. And we just recently had two national platformers, one LibSoc, one Libertarian Capitalist, and they were having a debate, and the LibSoc wouldn't actually admit that he wanted to use force, and what his answer was for everything was, I would just educate people. I would educate people, and then people would obviously not use force to come and take the stuff that they desire.
Possibly the best place to re-educate these people, Jason, might be in a camp. You might say, like, let's start up some libertarian re-education camps, comrade. It sounds like a winner to me.
Let's put them in cages to fight against the cages. This is how we win.
Loving it. Jason Lyon, can we get you on again? Can we get you on again?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I appreciate it.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. We can catch you on Twitter at Mr. Bearded Truth, at Mr. Bearded Truth. And how often do you do your periscopes? Maybe twice a week or thereabouts, 3 times a week?
I do three times a week. So it's Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure on the time difference between you and your Australian viewers, but yes.
They'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. 7 p.m. Eastern. Mr. Bearded Truth, thanks for joining us on the Common Discourse. We'll have you on again real soon. For everyone in the chat, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all very shortly. Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Thank you.
James R. here. When I'm not in court defending the boys from the starting block against slander charges.
Alleged!
Yes.
Are you there still?
Alleged. I'm hosting Trust and Verify with Boogie Bumper every Sunday night at 1 a.m. on tavshow.com. Join us and all your favorite broadcasters there.
tavshow.com.
Friend and foe alike, join me, Varun Prasad, every week on the Common Discourse Weekly Roundup podcast. You can follow the show on @TCD Tweet on Twitter and Periscope. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Stream Me, iTunes, or your preferred podcast platform. If you like what you hear, or you would like to express your raging discontent, please consider leaving us a review. The Common Discourse, independent political opinion, thought, and analysis for the people, by the people.
Do you lie awake at night pondering life's big questions? Is there a God? What is the meaning of life? How would one do an hour-long sports show without ever actually talking about sport? If yes, we can help you answer 33% of these pressing questions. All you have to do is check out the starting block on tavshow.com, Periscope, Stream Me, or YouTube, Wednesday mornings at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also download the podcast on iTunes just by searching for The Starting Block in the store or at thestartingblock.podbean.com. Or if you're really desperate for answers, why not check us out on Twitter at The Starting Block, no K at the end, don't forget to drop that K. Enlightenment is now only a click away.
Now that is a freaking awesome commercial.